Hi there, campers. Today I'm here to talk to you about alignment. Alignment being the A in the CARP principles: contrast, alignment, repetition, and proximity. You heard about contrast last week, and this week you're going to hear about alignment, repetition, and proximity. Alignment groups elements, and alignment moves the eye, and alignment creates hierarchy. All right? Alignment groups elements, moves the eye, and creates hierarchy. There are two main ways to get this. You can align elements, and by elements I mean type and art, using a grid, which you'll hear more about in the future. Some of you may already know what a grid is. If you've done, say, high school journalism, you may have worked with a grid in a yearbook. So a grid is one way to align elements. And the other way, and you'll likely use both of these in your infographic, but the other way to align elements is with each other. So the principle of alignment means that nothing should be placed on a page arbitrarily. Every element on a page must be aligned with another element on the page. This makes your job easier, because if you start just putting things down without anchoring them to each other, then very quickly your layout is going to get out of control. Alignment works to unify and organize where things go, and alignment signals relationships, how the elements on a page are supposed to relate to one another. All right? So you simply have to identify that something else on the page to align with. And a key way to do this is to sketch out layouts. With this principle, you can achieve internal organization of all your elements. And as I said earlier, the main purpose of this is to help the reader know to help the reader's eye follow your layout and know what's important. So I'm going to give you plenty of examples here in a minute. How to create alignment. Okay, the first thing you need to do is you need to visualize whatever page you're laying out. Let's say it's your infographic. You need to visualize your page in units. And the most basic way to create units is to make all your units the same size and shape. More advanced is to make them different sizes, but then to align the elements with each other. Here's an example. So you're looking at these two different layouts. On the left, there's proper alignment. Each one of these boxes or squares is aligned with the other. Here we have mixed alignment. Now you're saying to yourself, what idiot would lay something out like this? Well, this is really obvious because all we're looking at here are geometric shapes. But if each one of these shapes was information, very quickly you'll be surprised. Without some organizational pattern that you've developed, a format that you've developed on your page, without that, it's very easy for your page to turn into this. More advanced is you create elements of different sizes and you align them with each other. Now, this one, which might look like your infographic, as might this one actually, could look like your infographic. This one has 3 columns. You can see the columns there. And then these columns have been subdivided into smaller units. So everything fits together like a puzzle. And that's what you're trying to do ultimately when you lay something out, is you're fitting the elements together like a puzzle. On the right, we have no alignment. Again, even though you're looking at this and saying, well, this is obviously not well done, if you were in fact just taking your elements of your infographic and starting to put them on a page without a plan about where things would go, then you would very quickly end up with this. Now, how can you get there? What you must do is you need to start by looking at the information that you have to include on whatever it is you're laying out. Maybe it's 3 pictures. Maybe it's, as with your infographic, maybe it's a bar chart and a pie chart. Maybe it's 3 photographs. Maybe it's some small blocks of text. And those small blocks, there's a small block of text going with each photograph. Now, what you need to ask yourself is, by sketching your layout, where can these things go that I can align them with each other? So what you must do is you must sketch. I'm hoping you can see this layout. I always sketch, and designers sketch on pieces of paper. By sketching, what you allow yourself to do is not get tangled in your underwear. What do I mean by that? You're all tangled up in the details of your layout. This will happen if you just start taking the elements that you have for an infographic, say, and then just putting them in a layout and InDesign. Very quickly, it will get disorganized. But if you've looked at your information, if you've thought about how this information can fit and what kinds of shapes that information fits in, then you can sketch. So here's some examples. Here's one where I've got 3 photos and text next to it, and then a pie chart and a bar chart at the bottom. So I've created these units for that information to go in. Here's another one where I've got 4 units, and so my information, it might be photos and text, but they're going to go in each one of these units that I've put on my page. Here's another one with 4 units plus a space for a headline. By visualizing what's going on your page as blocks of information, then you will have a much better chance of organizing that information and aligning it in a way that makes sense. If you couldn't see that very well, I'm sorry, but now I have examples. An infographic that a student made, and he actually designed this himself in InDesign, but he did exactly what I just talked about. He had his infographic was on what happened with sports the day sports stopped, and he's done a kind of timeline. All right, so what he did was he knew he had this information, and he knew he had these graphics that he created. And so what he did was he created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 equal shapes. He laid out one shape, and then he made every other shape a reflection of that shape. So he's got alignment internally where all of these text blocks align with each other and these graphics align with each other. You see? So he's got both an organization that is very consistent and easy once he figured it out, because once he figured out one unit, then he could just figure out the others. Now, something else this required, and good design often does require, is editing. All of these copy blocks had to be roughly the same size. So your solution, if you've got too much text, is not to make that frame bigger. It is to edit the text so it fits in the frame. You don't want to start changing your frame sizes to accommodate text. You want to figure out a format and then make each unit the same, and then align the elements within those units with each other. Here's another one that a student created a couple of semesters ago. He also created this in InDesign. And by the way, he had never used InDesign before, so let that reassure you if you want to take the plunge, and I hope you do. He has created several units. Now, the first version of this he showed me, these were all kind of crowded. And part of the reason, and I'm going to talk about that when I start talking about proximity, is that he didn't leave adequate space between each unit so that each unit existed visually as one thing. However, he got that problem solved. But he started by creating a kind of grid or template or format and created one unit, right? And then made each other unit the same format, same text formatting, same alignment. I mean, you could literally make one of these and then cut and paste it 3 more times and just change the information. He also, although not on this one, but he also made these almost exactly the same length so that these things would, each group block of text would fit very neatly within the unit. And then down at the bottom, he has his list of scholarship hall amenities, and then he's got a bar chart, but still these all fit. Look at this. These all fit within these units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is smaller. He's just created a separate space for that because that is for the headline and the explainer. Headline, explainer, text. Here's another example. Well, this one seems more complicated, right? You're looking at this and thinking, well, there isn't a pattern on here, but there certainly is a pattern. Study this for a second and see if you can see it. The next slide I have has lines to show you. Here we go. So essentially, the designer has come up with, not quite, I can't get my lines precise, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 equal compartments. If you want to think of your units as compartments where things will go, compartments on the page. Now you don't have a vertical compartment. These are horizontal compartments, and then within each compartment the design is handled a little bit differently, but you'll notice that this information and this information is still packaged and separated. That's proximity. And then here we've got alignment within each frame. And a pro tip that I'll be talking about more than once is when you format text within a frame and you're aligning text, make sure that that text does not run up against the edges of a frame. If you run it up to the edges of the frame, suddenly your page looks very busy and crowded. I offer this example because this is about how you can align just with type. You think, well, I've got to have pictures. You do not. So the designer's job here was to create a flyer for A Clockwork Orange, a poster for A Clockwork Orange. A Clockwork Orange is a classic war film. Yeah, it's not a war film. Okay, right now I cannot remember the topic. I just remember one horrifying scene where this guy's eyes are pinned open so that he has to watch propaganda. Anyway, A Clockwork Orange. So what did the designer do? Well, the designer started by designing the title. You can only do this in a program like InDesign. This would never work in Word because Word doesn't allow you to control this kind of precise placements of text. He had to drop the O down a little bit, tuck the A in. So you would start by creating this title. Now, he thinks or she thinks, what other blocks of text do I have? And now, what am I going to align these blocks with within my layout? You may find this relevant to your poster design. He had this block. Oh, right. I could read the poster and then I would know what it was about. Being the adventures of a young man whose principal interests are rape, ultraviolence, and Beethoven. Clearly, I had not read this. I was just preoccupied with the design. In any case, so he's got this block of text, or she's got this block of text, and the headline is play. So now what we're going to what they're going to do is they're going to find a point in the title to align this with. And we've got Stanley Kubrick, the director, his name, and it's got to be aligned with something. And then we've got the basic production information. How did that work? Look at this. Precise. Not precise line placement, because PowerPoint doesn't like precision. But anyway, this aligned with this, aligned with the K, right? And then this aligned with the L, aligned with the production information. That is some precision work right there. How did they get to this? Well, for one thing, they tried a bunch of different fonts, and he or she, they, I'm just going to say they sized the font until it fit in exactly this space, till Kubrick fit. Now, Stanley wasn't going to fit because it's a shorter word, but that's okay. So we have this very precise alignment here, very precise alignment there, and then alignment with this also. So your eye moves in almost a circular fashion. This being the least important, information, and this being the most important information. A resume. I designed this resume for a friend of mine using alignments. Also, I sketched it. I knew the information I had that I needed to go on this page. So on most resumes, we've got experience, and those experience involve longer lines and wider columns. And then we've got skills and references, which are naturally narrow. That's why this 2-column resume works so incredibly well, because you can put information that fits very well in a narrow column, and you use in the wider column, wider information in a wider column, and this makes very efficient, attractive use of space. So let's talk alignments. Left alignment on the text, indented alignment on the bullets throughout. What do these alignments do? They guide the reader's eye, right? They create relationships between this information and this. They intuitively tell the reader what's most important, this, by creating a hierarchy. You're going to hear us talk a lot about hierarchy. Hierarchy being what is the most important thing. What is the order that you want readers to look at your design? That was so ungrammatical. Let me try that again. What order do you want a reader to look at things on your page? So what alignment does is it creates hierarchy, and it tells the reader to look from here, in this case, to here, right? And it helps you as a designer organize the information. I'm going to talk about text alignments in a minute, but I'm using right alignment here. And one of my rules of right text alignment is you can only do it with very small amounts of text. So you can see my columns here. Basically, I just created 2 text boxes, one for this information and a narrow one for this information. But I did put plenty of space between them, because if this space had been half as wide, this would have started to look very visually confusing. Space is your friend. Space is your friend in design. white space. One past semester, I asked students I provided students with some photos, and I asked them to do a one-page layout. Actually, what they did was they did sketches, because designers sketch first. You heard me say that. Designers sketch first. So I asked students to sketch a layout based on some pictures and a headline I gave them. And this student used alignment very smartly. She laid out this photo. She sketched in the shape so you could tell what was to go where. And then she aligned the title with the face. So you see how your eye goes down here, and then she used this drop cap. So your eye goes down there and then it brings your eye over here. Could she have put this to the right over this first column, which seems intuitive, right? This is the first column of text. We're not talking about a lot of text here. So she could have done that, and it would have worked fine in a different way. But I really liked her thinking about how your eye would go down through the photo and into the layout. This is using a principle I devised called let the picture tell you what to do with the design. When you're going to lay out a 2-page spread or a 1-page anything, and you put a photo down, look at the elements of that photo and see what you can align other elements in the page with that photograph. Here's a web page. Notice the alignments. We have left alignment and how that moves your eye using these units. So here's a unit, here's a unit, here's a compartment, here's a compartment. Now this is actually using a grid being a set of lines that provides you with versatile or maybe not so versatile placements. So in this case, what we have here is, give me a second to count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I'm not going to go out on that limb because I am noticing that all these are slightly different width. And there's not alignment here down through here. So the alignments are all happening down here. Left alignment. One rule of thumb of alignment is if you're going to left align text, then left align the titles. For some reason, when people get into their infographics, they want to center everything. And centered alignment, as I'm going to talk about in a second, is the least easy both to typeset and to read. So here we are, text alignments. I'm going to talk about 4 different text alignments: centered alignment, left alignment, right alignment, and justified alignment. All of these alignments you've probably messed with in Word because they're all available in Word. And if you haven't messed with them, then you should, to try, even just in Word, to try to get a feel for how those different alignments work. When you center copy, so here's a tricky thing about centered alignment, is you have to control the line breaks. If you rely on whatever program you're using to decide where the line breaks, you're going to very likely to end up with a word or 2 words at the bottom. And that's really ugly and attracts attention to itself. There's actually a name for this, and it's called an orphan. And you want to avoid orphans. Well, not in real life. You want to embrace orphans, but you don't want to embrace orphans in text design, in text layout. So when you center copy, you have to control your line breaks carefully to make them look attractive. And you only want to center small blocks of text. Centered text is not easy to read. And then we have left aligned text. Left aligned text is the easiest of all text formats to read. And the reason is because it's how we write. And how we read. We read left to right in English. So when you align text left, you're doing what the eye and brain already understand. And it's also easier to format because you don't have to worry so much about where every line breaks. However, and please make a note of this, when you are setting your text for your infographic, or for example, in a resume, you do not want any word to break at the end of a line and need a hyphen. You need to control those line breaks by putting your cursor there and doing a return so that you don't have those ugly hyphens. Really, hyphenated line breaks or word breaks only work in big blocks of text. But otherwise, if you're writing a resume, a cover letter, anything where your attention to detail is going to impress someone, an employer, or is going to make something easier for people to read, you want to avoid line breaks. Here's an example of left versus centered alignment. And you can see from looking at these two comparisons, it is obvious which one is easier to read. And because these lines on the centered text are similar in length, it almost looks like a mistake. Whereas this looks very intentional. This does not look intentional. This is not what you should do ever. I'll show you some examples where it does work, but in a bigger block of text, centering does not work. Left is always the way to go. Here is an example of an infographic template about the history of money in which they have used both a left alignment and a centered alignment. Centered alignment in what might be the explainer. Centered alignment that goes with each item on this timeline. But notice how they're using left alignment here along this line. This helps distinguish that. This different alignment helps distinguish that as something different from these. And that's why it works. But this also works because we are talking 3 lines of text on each one of these. That's about as much text as you can center. Maybe 4 lines. Otherwise, it's going to start to get unruly. And then we have right alignment. Right alignment is dramatic. You only can use it with small copy blocks. It is the least easiest form to format and read. Although honestly, as I say that, it's probably not any harder than doing centered alignment well. Where it works is for small amounts of text that are aligned up next to, say, a photograph. So here's an example. In this fakey infographic template, we have right alignment, and then we have right and left alignment. Now, if I were critiquing the work of this designer, I would probably make this all left aligned because I don't think this right alignment really helps connect this with the rest of this. And in fact, well, okay, I'd have to experiment. I could be wrong because if you left aligned this, then you would have this ragged right edge running up to this ragged left edge, and that might look messy. One would have to try it 2 ways. But they're making the left alignment work pretty well because they don't have a really this is kind of a short line, but it's not so short that it looks completely unattractive. And these line breaks are all very well controlled, even though this is dummy text. And then we have justified alignment. Justified alignment is where the computer forces whatever text you are justifying to each edge of a column. It only works when you have smaller type and a wider column. In other words, the more words you have in a line for the computer to justify, the easier. If you don't have a lot of words, if your type is bigger or you have more, or if your type is bigger or your column is narrower, you are always going to get these weird white gaps and these rivers, what we call them rivers, down through the text, because there aren't enough words here for the computer to spread out evenly. So smaller type, wider column for justification. And last but not least, and excuse the very fuzzy reproduction of this, but it's because I took a photograph of a magazine page, and this has been processed a couple times, but you don't need to read the words. You just need to look at the type alignments. So this is a layout in which a designer used two different alignments. The designer used centered alignment on this side and left alignment on the other. A reminder that if you're going to left align text, then left align the title and every other piece of information related to it. Don't center a title over left align text. If you're centering, center. So use consistent type alignment. If I back up, I'm going to back up and see, oh, no, they don't have titles there. Okay, so when we look at this, we can also see some other things they did quite in terms of alignment. Aligned the top of the photo and the bottom of the photo. The top of the photo with the text. And then each one of these has been edited to be the same number of lines. So that's what editors do. There is no more detail-oriented, fastidious design work done anywhere than magazines. I mean, books are beautiful, but the thing about magazines is there's so many elements on pages that have to be organized. And so it can be very complicated. They do use grids. But even with grids, they have a lot of options for laying things out. This is in 3 even columns. But the alignments, left, centered, and editing text so that you can't probably see this, but not a single one of these lines breaks on a hyphenated word. Not a single one. None of these as well. These had to be edited. There's some long dashes here, but otherwise these were edited so that the type setting was perfect and the alignments were perfect. And that's all for today.